Hey there, welcome to Drawing Expressions. I'm Parz. For the past few months, I have been writing and sharing my episodic journey, episodic story, based on Apothecaria, the potion-making journaling solo roleplay game. And in each video, which is, gets to be quite long because there's not just the narration, but there's also all the explanations that go into what made the episode, and then a discussion besides on some element of writing or what I want to highlight in any given story. This video strips all that out. This is only the story starting from episode 0, which is the prologue, all the way through to the end, the rest period of week 3. So it's about 2 hours worth of story. And I hope that you'll sit back and enjoy a beverage or 2 or 3, because it is a couple hours, of what it is that Mistress Sweetwater and her familiar Mouse Eye get up to. This does take us from the first time that I recorded the Apothecaria-based story, all the way through episode 3, and each episode, you experiment and you try things, and some things work and some things you improve on. So you get to see not just as she develops, but you also get to see as I develop my storytelling and video making abilities increase as well. Anyways, all that said, I hope you enjoy, and I'll see you on the tail end of this. Okay, enjoy. Episode 0, Prologue, It All Began. It's not always easy to be the first one in your family to do something. It's even more difficult if it's been a while since anyone in the family has done a first. Then take into account a father who scrimped and saved to send his only child to school while the rest of the family called him a fool for thinking an education was worth anything. Before I set off to the distant city to start my education, father sat me down, looked me in the eye, and laid it on thick. I'm a man of few words, so I'll keep this short. I've invested my life savings into you and this school. Make me proud. And I hope you'll come back flush with herbal knowledge that will help the entire community. There's nothing for you here worth having, but knowledge will allow you to be something. Now off with you. The cart taking you to the city is just about here. And that was that. What savings that were left after tuition went to paying my way there. I've never been to the city. Heck, I've never been much beyond the house. And now I'm watching the sky, the landscape, even the air change. It's so weird to see so much change day after day. The rhythm of the cart's movement never changed, although the endless bumps and potholes did lessen as we got closer and closer to town. So after I was dropped off at the school, the driver whose name I never learned and who didn't speak at all, but was kind enough to take me to the front door, I was rushed straight to a room and into a seat behind a desk. I wasn't told much besides that I was late, but also just in time. If that was supposed to be some sort of explanation for anything, I didn't get it. An adult, presumably the teacher, took one look at me, grunted, and said to the entire class, "Did I mention there were about 10 kids, all roughly my age? Welcome to herbology and apothecary training. I'm your instructor. Call me Madame Wintergleam. Now we shall learn about the wonders of the natural world and do so from the safety of this schoolroom. Now we'll..." Yes? I just put up my hand. "Will we get to pick herbs and see places and..." "Oh my goodness, no. It's dangerous. A boy died recently, so all classes are now held safely within these walls. And now to begin." And that was that. I tried to pay attention, but I just wasn't able to absorb what was being said. Sit in this room? How boring. At least I'd been able to walk next to the cart from time to time to stretch my legs, and the thought of sitting in a room at home was unthinkable. So my mind wandered, and I got caught. "If you are bored, leave my classroom. Walk, move, do whatever, but do it elsewhere." Shamed, and with the sound of giggles and guffaws, I left, and vowed to not return. Which is how I found myself in High Rannoch, standing on the avenue in front of my now former school, with all my belongings slung over my shoulder, wondering what to do. And my only thought was that outside the city walls there must be an herbalist, a midwife, a wise woman, someone who could teach me in exchange for labor. I'd noticed a path heading off into the woods just before the cart had passed through the city gates. Perhaps that path would lead to my educational salvation. My naivete told me that it was worth a try. Far better, I told myself, than trying to catch a ride back home and admitting failure. It turns out my luck was both with me and against me. The path did eventually lead to what could only be a witch's cottage. It was a very basic dwelling, bare of decoration, but with a certain air of herbs, peace, and healing. I knocked on the door, although I already figured no one was home, given that no smoke was rising from the chimney. The door was unlocked, so I let myself in. A few basic things were next to a work table, like a mortar and pestle, a cauldron over the fire pit, and not much else, except for a book. It was open to the first page, and I must admit that I felt curious, so I started reading. It opened by saying that the witch who owns the cottage isn't here, with no mention of returning. How odd. Which is when there was a knock on the door, which opened right after. A young man walked in with warts all over his lips. Somehow he managed to croak out, "Help me!" Episode 1, Spring, Week 1, Cure episode. Albert Flywheel is frogified. The first thing the book said was that the curing of ailments isn't all that difficult. And it's true, and not. The poor man, Albert Flywheel, the son of the miller, loved to read. In particular, he loved to read stories where people would do something accidentally magical and have incredible things happen. He hadn't counted on becoming frogified by kissing frogs, in hopes of having one be a transformed and forever grateful princess. I told Albert I'd prepare a remedy and that I'd let him know when it was ready. He left, and I read as much as I could about how to cure his affliction. After considering the hows of his cure, I decided to first travel to Hero's Hollow. Maybe I was getting a bit ahead of myself, having spent a bit of time reading instructions from an absent witch, but I felt I was a hero in helping someone who clearly needed it. The day was pleasant. I was whistling in a fabulous mood and full of confidence that I'd soon be an accomplished healer. And people said things like this were difficult. That was the last thought I had before the ground rushed up past me and I landed in the dark. And at some point I came to. Hero's Hollow, huh? Hollow, that's for sure. After a bit of feeling around and getting used to the bit of light shining down from above, I realized I was on the wrong side of some sort of jail cell. Iron bars are one of those quick clues that things aren't going according to plan. A bit of panic hit me, I must admit. I grabbed the cell door and began to shake it, yelling, crying, begging. Luck was with me again. The key fell out of the lock and landed within reach. In short order, I was out. Sniffing the air told me that one way along the long row of cells was old and musty, probably going deeper into the jail. The other way was fresher, more organic smells. Even rot can be good. Something was alive recently. Some feeling around, some more sniffing the air, and finally catching some light got me out from underground and into a bog. And luck was with me again. In short order, I'd found both some crow coal and some skullcap. I think ravens must have dropped the crow coal, and the skullcap was growing right next to it. I now had my reagent to deal with the poison that lies latent in some frog skins. I now needed something for the warts. That took me to Meltwater Lock. This time I walked far more cautiously. I didn't need another bit of trouble trying to escape from behind any sort of door or cell involving a lock. The walk was long but entirely uneventful, and easily found within the lock was Smoothcroak. It had taken me far longer than I'd originally thought it would take, but I did eventually get back to the cabin with my reagents. Now it was time to prepare them. I made quick work with the mortar and pestle on the skullcap while waiting for the Smoothcroak to release its goodness within the steaming cauldron. With everything in readiness, I fetched Albert. I carefully wiped the resulting watery cream over his lips, which immediately began to heal. He smiled in relief. "I wasn't sure I'd see you again. I thought maybe you weren't a proper witch, but I can feel things getting better already. Thank you." And then he paid me. I get paid? I could be sitting in a classroom getting bored, but here I am making money. Wow. If Dad ever hears that I dropped out of school, hopefully I'll have a small fortune to show for it. And now I think I'll have a bit of a rest before I think about next things. I got paid! Episode 2, Spring, Week 1, Rest episode, Meeting Mouse-Eye. After curing Albert and having a bit of a rest, most especially getting over falling into that horrid cell, you'd think someone would have done a better job of shoring up the roof so as to not let prisoners have a way out, granted a hole in the roof, but still. Anyway, with the witch gone but people still needing her services, I decided to settle in and do what I can. And yes, the allure of making some coin is fabulous, but really my goal now is to do a good job so that when, not if, the old witch returns, she'll be appreciative of my efforts and will train me up. Meanwhile, I have her book and whatever notes, bits, and doodads I can find. Which is all fine and good, but I do need wood for the fire, and food to eat, and laundry to do, and... I was busy for a few days just getting things back to a maintained level. As I worked, I thought about something the book mentioned, a familiar. I'm not entirely sure what it is that a familiar is, other than some sort of helpful creature who could help me. And while I didn't want to get ahead of myself again, I also thought that the fact that I just cured my first patient and that I intended to continue should be enough justification to put it out there and so see if there was a familiar who would want to work with me. Brief break. The book said I should go to a location where I felt most in line with the energy. The forest is where I dwelled all my life, so to the forest of Glimmerwood Grove I went. Having learned my lesson of being mindful of my surroundings, particularly where I'm walking, I tried to pay attention. But my mind wandered. I thought about the wish I'd make before calling for my familiar, and I'd wondered who'd answer the call, and I wondered how they'd be able to help me, and I wondered, "Lost in thought, are ya?" The voice, old and gravelly, cut through my musings. "Sorry, what?" Standing there, plain as day, stood an elderly gentleman. "I've been seeing smoke rising from the old witch's cottage, but I know she's not there. You moved in?" While I could have been distressed about the question, I decided to just admit it. "Yes, for now anyway. It seems someone needs to be the local witch until she returns." He grunted. Knew her stuff, she did. Had that place full of plants and animals and who knows what else. Could cure the most horrendous of things. By the look of you, I'd say you can barely maintain good health, let alone cure ill. Hopefully, though, you won't be quite so touchy about all the dumb ways people find to injure themselves." "Well, I did just cure someone who'd been frogified." "Ah, that'd be the flywheel boy. Damn fool, in my opinion, kissing frogs and dreaming of living in castles and all that royal living instead of helping at the mill. So where you headed?" I didn't see any harm in revealing it, so I told him. He grunted in reply. "Plenty of things growing in the grove. Good luck in your hunt." And here's where I may have made a mistake. I'm certainly going to hunt for ingredients, but first I'm going to summon a familiar. I thought it'd sound impressive. It wasn't taken that way. "A familiar, huh? What's that, some sort of something what does your work for you? Sounds to me like another version of kissing frogs, if you take my meaning." I think I must have recoiled a bit before responding, but I didn't get the chance. "Well, good luck to you. Don't let me keep you." And with that, he walked off. Kissing a... I'm not trying to... Am I? Is this a way to avoid work? To be less than I should be? These thoughts and more swirled in my head as my legs carried me to a spot in a clearing in the grove. So, should I do this? Should I ask for help? Should I look more like a real witch by having a familiar? Yes, I decided. Yes, I should. I deserve one, a helpful one, a giant one, a good one. I must admit that I was far less tranquil than I wanted to be, and probably should have been, but I was bound and determined to see this through. After not gently kinda throwing stones into a circle of not placing more tossing flowers into the mix, I kind of not sat more threw my butt onto the ground and then began. I felt, I magicked, I sang harsher than was pleasant, felt aggrieved, thought, I should have waited to calm down and get my center back. But I didn't. Eventually, I did hear a voice. It was tiny, soft, barely there, but I heard it. Something had responded. I asked it to show itself. From behind a small boundary of weeds peeked out a mouse. Now, I'm not one to get squeamish about mice, but when you're dreaming of magnificent creatures, let's just say mouse is towards the bottom of the list. Hi? Not the best way to start things, admittedly. I'd just summoned. I should have been celebrating. And in its big, mousy eyes, I could see the hurt. I tried again. Hi, I'm glad you answered my call. What can I call you? It stood up on its hind legs before speaking. There were a lot of creatures who followed you, all hoping to be your familiar, but they got scared away as you threw rocks and flowers around. I stayed and watched, and now I'm here. Ah, really not a good start. But I can try to salvage this. I'm really sorry. I was upset and I didn't honor the magic. Please forgive me. I do hope we can work together. Those eyes, so big on such a small creature. His name just seemed to come from them. Can I call you Mousei? He shrugged. Sure. With a twitch of whiskers, he looked around. What are we up to? Let's gather some things. Okay. And with that, we started looking for useful items. By which I mean I was looking for plants, and Mousei watched me. Why don't you go over there and pick some things? Must I? He asked. I had no idea how to answer that, so I just went with, it'd be great if you did. Okay, he said. After I'd harvested some wild rose and coffee cap, he eventually came out from the undergrowth and said, I found some songberries. Great, did you bring them? No, but I can take you to them. Less than helpful, but okay. Off we trudged. As we went along, I said, you could have brought them to me. Oh, I couldn't do that. I'm good at watching, and I have an amazing memory, but I don't carry things. Sorry. Right. Okay, well, I guess I can work with this. I guess. Aloud, I said, let's go to town. I haven't been there, really, and I think knowing what's there will help me in the future. Mousei just shrugged. Going back to High Rannoch this second time was a very different experience over the first. When I'd been in the cart, it had seemed big and daunting. This time, though, it seemed a bit smaller. The outer wall wasn't really a wall. It was more like rotting timbers surrounding several buildings, some houses, some shops, and one recently vacated, by me, school. I decided to visit a shop. I had 20 silver in my pocket, courtesy of my newfound potion-making abilities, and I thought I'd look into a thing or two to spruce up the cottage. Or maybe I could splurge on an ingredient or two and get ahead of what was sure to become a steady stream of patients. And so I went to the shop with a sign out front showing items being put into a sack. It had to be a general store. I walked in, and a small bell rang, alerting the proprietor of a potential customer entering the shop. Turns out it's called Bits and Bobs. The bits being what they sell, a bit of this and a bit of that, and the Bobs being the name of the people running the shop through several generations. This Bob was very nice, very helpful, and had plenty of bits for someone to buy. However, most of them are priced beyond anything I'll ever be able to afford. Turns out 20 silver isn't quite the fortune I thought it was. I must have spent a couple of hours looking at his stock and trying to convince myself that I'm not a pauper, despite being unable to afford anything. Bob was very understanding and I think a bit pitying as well. He wished me well and assured me he'd be happy to help me whenever I came back. Where Mousei was all that time, I didn't know. With that visit a bust, I thought I'd go to the tavern and have a bit of something while considering what to do next. It's called the Copper Fox Tavern. This place, too, was quite empty but for the proprietor. His name wasn't Copper or Fox, but instead Fusillade. Call me fussy, 'cause I am where quality is concerned. He said the name was given to him because of his habit of doing things over and over again until he got the result he wanted. Anyway, he introduced himself and we chatted briefly, me talking about settling into the witch's cottage and his listening, when this young bravo walked in, apparently, or so Mousei told me afterward. The two exchanged knowing looks, and then the newcomer approached me. Which is to say, he less walked than strutted over, leaned up against my table, and before I had an idea of what was going on, he began what could only be considered his sales pitch. Roger Rogerson at your service. Monsters slain, dungeons delved, incredible feats feated. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see Fussy close his eyes and shake his head. Clearly, Roger's rehearsing of his pitch had been aided by Fussy, and yet it still didn't flow. I smiled back politely. Why would I need your services, sir? I thought it best to be very polite. A quick look of confusion flashed on his face and then left as he found the answer. Word has it you've moved into the witch's cottage, and with you being young, inexperienced, and new to the area, I figured you'll want a stout companion as you gather ingredients. I must admit, that sounded attractive. Thoughts of the hollowness of Hero's Hollow resounded in my memory. I asked his price. I'm only a junior, he started, then stuttered to a stop with the frantic waving of Fussy's hands. 10 silver, and it's a big discount just for you. 10 silver? Half my amount earned on a potion? Oh, how far 20 silver doesn't go. I think, even though I tried not to react, that he caught my inward sense of sticker shock. He started again. Well, I suppose I could. More frantic waving of Fussy's hands led to, take a deposit for future services? I tried to continue smiling. Thanks, I'll keep you in mind whenever I go off foraging. And then I thanked them both and left. Seconds later, I heard Fussy and Roger arguing. Embarrassed, I just walked, not really paying attention, until I found myself at the town's fountain. It's little more than a well, but instead of dipping a bucket into a hole in the ground, the water conveniently comes up and burbles onto a large basin. I sat on the edge, just looking around at the few buildings I could see. One of them was my former school. I wondered if maybe I'd been too hasty in leaving. I wondered what in the world I was doing. I wondered, hello, dear, you look lost. I looked up and saw a girl, not much older than me, holding a huge jug. Oh, sorry. I moved out of what I thought was her way. She giggled. Oh, don't move on my account. It's nice to take a break from chores. She sat down next to me. I'm Francie. I didn't know what to say, so I went with, hi? I think she giggled again at my awkwardness. Are you a student at the school? I was. She nodded. I was too. Did they tell you about the boy who died? Yeah, and that it's why it's all learning inside. Yeah, they told us the same thing. That boy they kept on about died years ago, and apparently he fell. Some say from a cliff, others say it was from a high tree branch, but it was a son of the family that runs the school, so they stopped allowing anyone to leave. Unless you graduate or quit. So I quit. Really? Me too. So now I work as a domestic. What are you going to do? I'm living in a witch's cottage. She stopped and looked at me with eyes wide, mouth open. You didn't! You did? Wow! You are way braver than me. How's it like living with a real witch? I don't know. She hasn't been home. Oh-ho! A domestic for a witch who's not around? Have you looked through her stuff? Have you found her secrets? Oh, how exciting! And I guess somewhere around there is when I decided that the quiet and peace of the cottage would be far more welcome than these townspeople. Which is when Mouse Eye popped onto my shoulder and whispered, but loudly enough to be heard by Francie, Mistress beckons. Francie nearly dropped her jug in excitement. Is that a familiar? I've heard of them. Oh, yeah, sorry, but I have to go. He's so cute. What's his name? I paused for a moment, then said, I don't know if I should say, but I guess I can tell you. It's Mortimer. Mortimer d'Excellence. I started to get up, but then Mouse Eye once again loudly whispered, If you're going to share my name with someone, you should share my full name. I shot him a look, and he returned an innocent one back. Mortimer d'Excellence Magnificarius Wiggle Whiskers, the third. I got up quickly as Francie tried repeating what I just said, and almost ran out of the gates. I did manage to slow down on the way back and started to think about storing my new reagents and being ready whenever someone would need a witch's care. I did think to ask Mouse Eye where he'd been off to during my trip to town. I watched, he responded. Okay, I said. Tell me what you saw. All of it. Must I? Episode 3. Spring, Week 2, Cure episode. I become Mistress Sweetwater and cure Madame Hightower. I found myself wondering, once again, if I'd made a foolish choice in staying in the witch's cottage. It had been more than a week already, and I could feel my uncertainty filling the future. Did I really want those feelings of being someone apart from the rest of humanity? Yes, the cottage and grounds are peaceful, but at some point we all want companionship. Unwilling mousy familiars don't count. Nor do grumpy disbelievers in my ability to help them through their various ills and ailments. Nor do... I guess I'm just feeling sorry for myself. Who am I kidding? Stepping into the role of local witch without having a clear idea of what I'm doing. Let's face it, I'm making it up as I go along. Ugh. Maybe I need a hobby. Like taking care of things here isn't enough. Maybe Hi, you busy? Mouse eye. He tries, I think. Maybe my expectations, my hopes, and my dreams are just getting in the way. Maybe if He jumped onto my shoulder and then tapped on the side of my head. Hello, is anyone home? Somewhere in there I should have counted to 10 before answering, but I didn't give myself that space. So a bit more sharply than I should have, I answered, Yes, what is it? What's so important? He twitched his whiskers. He was irritated too. And I was probably the cause. But kudos to him, he swallowed a sarcastic comeback and got to the important thing he wanted to bring up. Something we've never discussed is what I should call you. And he was right. I'd never thought of telling him my name. Oh, well, it's... He quickly interrupted. Not your real name. Real names have power. If someone knows your real name, they can have power over you. Witch is your job, your title, but won't suffice as a name. Is there a name that speaks to you that you can call yourself and that others can use? I'd never given it much thought. Any thought, really. A name not my own that I'd make mine? It was a new and novel concept, one that was just so foreign. I wonder how someone goes about doing something like that. Would I need another trip to the Glimmerwood Grove to ask for one? Would I have received one at the school if I hadn't left, that is? Maybe, you have 5 minutes, so just ask yourself and find yourself a name. What? Why? 5 minutes before what? 4 minutes. Mental turmoil galore. But within all that, all the confusion and the unknown and a demanding mouse and an uncertain future and a past rapidly receding and choices becoming more and more permanent, I heard myself use a name. Mistress Sweetwater. 3 minutes. Mistress Sweetwater, I shouted. He paused, then murmured, Mistress Sweetwater, Madame Sweetwater, Mother Sweetwater, Granny Sweetwater. Yep, all sounds good. It works, Mistress Sweetwater. And that was that. I had a new name. And never would I use the old one again. So, if I had a new name, did that mean, Mouse-Eye, what's your real name? And he just looked at me. I'm here to help you to the degree that I want and can do. Telling you my real name isn't part of the deal. Oh, and the rush is because someone is coming down the path. And with that, there was a voice calling from outside the cottage. Hello, Miss New Witch, I require help. And then she knocked on the door. I flashed a look at Mouse-Eye. You could have told me she was coming, I hissed. I did, with 5 minutes to spare. As I reached for the door handle, Mouse-Eye said, Smile! Grrr. But I did smile as I opened the door, or at least I tried. Not that she noticed. She barged through the door and past me. Where's your mistress, girl? Don't just stand there. I'm in a hurry and my time is invaluable. My smile became more strained. I'm Mistress Sweetwater, the new witch. How can I help you? She turned and looked at me. No, girl, you misunderstand. My maid, Francie, said that you are the domestic here. I'm looking for the new witch that cured the miller's boy of his warty lips. Ah, well, that helps explain things. I cured him. She just stared at me. Then, well, are you going to help me or must I go somewhere else for help? That smile was now very forced. I'd love to help you, madame. Her eyes narrowed to slits. Hightower, Madame Hightower, as everyone in this part of the world knows, or should know, now you will help me. This was too much. Certainly, madame. I probably added too much obvious snark into that madame. If only you'd tell me what your affliction is. Should have known a little slip of a girl wouldn't know her stuff. If you were worth anything, you'd know just from my visage. Her visage? Her face. Something amiss on this horrible person's face. A cursory look didn't reveal anything. What? Oh, for heaven's sake, this, right here, as clear as the nose on your face. She was pointing at her nose. I took a closer look and saw a tiny wart. Have you tried kissing frogs? I asked. Her eyes blazed. The effrontery of such a question! No, I haven't been kissing frogs, nor rubbing them on my nose. It just appeared marring my flawless complexion, and I'm to host a small gathering of close acquaintances in a few days. What am I to do? Her angry facade gave way to anguish. Angrish, to coin a term. Frankly, I didn't see what the big deal was. And of course I will pay handsomely for a cure. Well, there was my motivation. Not a great one, but the coin would help smooth my trampled feelings. Okay, I'll get to work on a cure. You can go home and I'll— Absolutely not! The imperious bitch reemerged. I'll stay here, thank you very much, and ensure that you effect a cure post-haste. I will sleep on this bed and stay here until I am cured and can face society again. Will you now? Fine. Then I think I'll take my time in making this potion. But first, I need a diagnosis. And for that, I need to know, is it only the rhino wart? Are there others? A rhino-sized wart! How dare you! The rhino refers to the nose. I was asking if you had any other warts besides the one on your nose. That seemed to mollify her a bit. Ah, I see. A medical term. Frankly, you surprised me. But no other warts. I turned to the book. Mouse-Eye was there, out of sight from Madame Hightower. Quickly we identified her affliction. Toad nose. As we worked through the needed reagents, I found myself asking myself if there was something going on in the vicinity. First frogworts, and now toadworts? Strange. I turned back to my impatient patient. I need to gather reagents. Please stay here. Where I need to go is very dangerous, but I will return with the ingredients needed to cure you. You are certain you can eliminate my disfiguration? Yes, and in time for your party, but please be patient in the meantime. And with that, I gathered my things and headed out. Our first stop, Meltwater Lock. As we made our way to the lock and gathering, not just what we needed for treating my newest patient, who was helping me realize the connection between patient and patience, the one I needed more of, and the other I also needed more of. The first one will come in time if I continue to do a good job, but the other was all up to me. And regardless of anything else, that is surely not a subject covered in that school. Nope. This is something that requires experiences, and none were to be had behind a desk playing at potion making, whereas here I am, tromping around on a warm spring day on my way to gather this and that at the lock. Oh, if only my family could see me now, going from no prospects in the far-off woods to being someone counted upon, someone respected, someone— Hey, what's that? What's what? I looked around to see where we were. We'd just come out onto a beach. Where are you looking, Mouse-Eye? Right in front of you, in the sand. Sometime, and hopefully sometime soon, I'll learn to pay attention to where I am, to where I'm going, and to the very large tracks that look like a massive dog walked into the water. My first thought was gratitude for not meeting whatever it was that made those tracks. My next thought of gratitude is that they went down the beach and into the water. Had they been pointed the other way, I would have been scared of it wanting to go back into the lock, but stopping for a small witch lunch first. I ventured, "A dog?" Mouse Eye looked at me. "That big?" "A large dogfish?" We both stared at the tracks for a minute. Then I said, "What do you think the chances are that it's alone? You know, no mate, no large little dogfish?" We both listened intently. A gentle lapping of surf, insects buzzing, birds chirping, the safe sounds of a beach were all we heard. Certainly no crashing through foliage, no loud breath bubbles in the water, no signs anything would give us grief. That was a relief. Despite the feeling that we were safe, I still had Mouse Eye keep lookout. After all, he says he's good at watching, so watch out for danger. He took a position on a cliff edge while I started gathering reagents. First, gather up this. First up, smooth croak. It was an amazing ingredient last time, so I went with it again. Besides, finding the frogs so iridescently colorful was most of the joy in gathering it. Collecting the mucus that coats those beautiful skins was less so. And that was all I needed from here. But since I was determined to take my own sweet time with the cure, I also gathered some extra things, like wigfish. How can you not grab the seaweed wigs the fish put on their heads when they just parade back and forth in the water, desperate for attention? Although it's possible they were hoping I'd be some sort of beauty judge. The reason I'm only half kidding about the beauty show judge thing is that they, each of them, emerged from behind a grove of deepweed. After I'd taken a wig, the fish disappeared, leaving me free to harvest a branch or two of the reeds. As I prepared to gather up some gasweed, which had floated up to the surface from the depths, and also slime shell, because apparently I hadn't gotten my hands on enough slimy stuff after gathering the smooth croak, I called up to Mouse Eye to check out Glimmerwood Grove before we headed that way together. After getting through the seemingly required "must I set to collecting the last reagents. While I waited for the all clear, I decided to dry off and warm up by lying on the beach and soaking up the sun. I found myself, besides keeping an ear out for giant dogfish, staring up at the clouds. They were all puffy and white. What would it be like to fly up there? Wouldn't it be the same feeling of cold and wet like what happens when it's foggy? Would they be more solid? Could you turn clouds into thread and then into fabric? Imagine a set of clothes made from cloud cloth. Would they be light as air? Could I maybe one day fly to them? Or maybe I could just climb Moonbreaker Mountain and do it that way. I could maybe, "Good morning, sleepyhead." And then a pressure landed on my chest. Opening my eyes, there was an impudent mouse staring at me. I tried to speak, but between the sun, the sand, and my mouth being wide open while I napped, all I had was cotton in my mouth. And not cottony soft cloud. Nope, this was full-on cotton sand, the ultimate drying agent. After taking some refreshing gulps of lock water, I was finally able to ask about Glimmerwood Grove. "It's all good, and there's a group that wants to play a friendly game with you." I should have asked who the group was and what game they wanted to play, but I figured I'd find out in a little bit anyway. Reminder to self, ask the questions beforehand. When we got to the grove, there was indeed a group who challenged me to a game. Caber toss. Thankfully, the group was a group of pixies. If it had been trolls or really anything much bigger than me, I'd have lost of a certainty. As we set up for the game, getting the log, much more like a large stick, ready for tossing, the pixies started taunting me. It was good-natured, but they insisted that there be a small wager on the outcome. They said that the old witch would routinely lose and that she'd pay off her debt with a fresh reagent. They also let me know that if I refused to give a reagent, they'd lay a curse on me. There was at least one pixie who really wanted to practice their curse craft. Inspired by their attitude, especially the expectation I'd throw the game, I threw the caber farther than I ever would have dreamed I could. Pixie jaws dropped. I suppose you won fair and square, although I wonder why. The old witch supported us with fresh reagents and needed an excuse so she'd lose at the caber toss. Ah, well. And they turned to go. Aren't you forgetting something? I wondered if I crossed my arms, tapped my feet, or pursed my lips if I'd look more imposing. One of the pixies reluctantly reached into a pouch. Fair's fair, I suppose. And with that he handed me 10 silver. And then they left in a huff. After they'd gone, I looked for Mouse-Eye. Pixies? Caber toss? Are you kidding me? I must admit I got pretty shrill. Granted, okay. But 10 silver is nothing to sneeze at. And did you know the old witch was a pixie caber toss team supporter? That's something. So all in all, it all worked out. Thanks to me. And your bulging biceps, of course. We both knew that I don't really have biceps, let alone ones that bulge. My dad, arms bigger than my whole body. Me, thin as reeds. Come on, let's get to work. These things won't gather themselves. After walking a bit, we started hearing singing. Unearthly singing. God-awful unearthly singing. Drunk fairies. If you've never heard drunk fairies before, they're just like regular fairies, but using dirty lyrics, out-of-tune melodies, and harmonies that can knock birds unconscious. I think I heard this one. There once was a man from Glasnee, whose prick was the size of a flea. You'd think never under heaven that it could plant a bun in the oven. It just made wee bear number 23. Yep, drunk fairies. The thing about drunk fairies is that you can pretend to be just about anything and they'll believe it. For instance, this is how our little conversation went. Hey, who are you? I'm a fairy good witch here to harvest some songberries because they're so ripe and sweet. Oh, hi, I recognize you. Sure, go ahead. While I picked a few, I couldn't help but notice some rats in cages off to the side. I had to ask, what are you doing with the rats? Training them, fastest rats you'll ever see. May I have some of their spit? Rat spit is fantastic for teeth. Sure, but it won't make you any faster. I'm sure that's okay. A small vial of rat spit later, and I was ready to head home and on to kicking someone out of the cottage. Home. Did I just call the cottage home? I guess I did. So I guess it's time to start treating it not as a guest would, but as an owner would. And hopefully the old witch, when she returns, will appreciate my efforts. It was with that in mind that I headed back. Yes, I'd shown her that I wouldn't be rushed out, but I was tired, hungry, and so ready for a bath and bed. But first, a potion. As I approached the cottage, Francie yelled out to me from the wood chopping block. Hello, mistress. Oh, my lady will be so happy to see you back. How was your adventures of getting your things? Why didn't you tell me you were really a witch? Why would someone who's so clearly skilled need lessons in healing the misfortunes of others? Oh, I should alert my lady you're back. Was I gone for so long that Madame Hightower needed her maid? Oh, yeah, probably. So that's 2 people who can vacate as soon as I've got the potion prepared. I entered the cottage, my cottage, I amended, and was met with the expected imperious demands. Where have you been? Did you want me to die of exposure and starvation? I had to bring Francie here to keep me safe and sound, and what have you done? Nothing, except perhaps gather things. Something in there brought me up short. I asked you to wait at home. You refused, but you went back home to bring your servant here? Well, of course. I couldn't leave you to your own devices without my supervision, and yet I needed someone to take care of all the little duties while you were away. I decided not to press it. Instead, I asked Francie to get the fire stoked. You will not give directions to my servant, young lady. If you have need of something, I expect you to do it. It's what I'm paying for, after all. Sealing my lips so tight that they must have turned a blinding white, I got the fire up to boil the smooth croak mucus. As it boiled, I crushed the songberries and let them sit in the mortar. I figured letting the air into the juice would enhance its sweetness. It felt like it took forever, what with scowls from one and poorly contained excitement from the other, but eventually I'd poured the 2 together and thus finalized the potion. Madame Hightower held her nose as she started to drink, but then eagerly downed the rest. The songberries really were quite sweet. After she downed the last of it, she sat down heavily onto my bed. She looked dazed. Yeah, I was worried something had gone wrong and was getting ready to do... I really don't know what I would have done. But she looked at me and for the first time since arriving, was actually nice. You make a wonderfully tasting healing concoction, Mistress Sweetwater. My thanks to you. I believe this is your going rate, plus let me add a bit extra for the delightful taste. 24 silver. Isn't that lovely? But isn't it really lovely just how she changed? Those songberries and its mood-enhancing properties. Golden. Francie then rushed to her mistress's side. My lady, your wart is gone. The lady looked at her maid. I have no doubt this lovely new witch achieved a cure. As she and Francie made their way out the door, Madame Hightower looked back at me. At the party I'll be hosting, I expect Mrs. Ruffage, the head mistress of the herbology school, will be there. I believe she's the old witch's cousin. I'll be sure to put in a good word. I'm sure she'll be pleased to hear that you are filling in so ably. Good day to you. And that was that. No invitation, though. Although, to be honest, I would have declined. Still, it would have been nice to have been asked. After the ladies had left, I finally turned to Mouse-Eye. Well, we're home. Our home. Mouse-Eye just curled up near the fire. That's nice. Then Mousy snores quickly followed. You know what? Food and bath can wait. I laid down on the bed without bothering to undress first. That's something you can do in your own home. Episode 4. Spring, Week 2, Rest Episode. A Madcap Meeting. Home. That is what I call the cottage and grounds. It had been only a week and a bit, but everything felt like it was mine. Both my property, but also my responsibility to care for, maintain, and even improve. No feelings of being a guest anymore, and certainly not of being a trespasser or interloper. Maybe I'd prove something to the house. Or maybe it was my intention to stay and care for, not just the property, but for the people and creatures who might come to me for help. I had stepped fully into being the witch. There's a change in perspective when you go from being a guest to being an owner. Things that you accepted as being just the way it is turns into things you can change. But I also wanted to start small. Allowing my thoughts to imagine changes throughout the grounds was just too much to consider all at once. The cottage needed a deep clean, the garden beds needed clearing of brambles, places where there had been additions and outbuildings needed rejuvenation. There was a lot that an owner should want to fix and improve. Getting back to small starts, I decided that the first thing that needed doing was planting something in the one cleared garden plot. Everything else could wait. But what to plant? In the old witch's notes, it said I could plant anything in it and it'd be a happy and healthy plant, which is why I laid out my existing ingredients to see what would best go in the ground. I had quite the assortment. From Glimmerwood Grove, wild rose, coffee cap, songberries. From Meltwater Loch, deep reed, gas reed, and this of course ignores the animal and magic reagents. Each of them had good reasons to be in the ground, but I finally decided on wild rose, although I almost planted songberries, and then I realized I might be inviting fairies, drunk or otherwise, to sing near the cottage at all hours. Wild rose is pretty, smells nice, and is a potent reagent that helps bone and skin ailments. It was so easy to plant, but the thing that caught my attention was how it so quickly sprang to life. This place is bound to be full of surprises. Along with the surprises that I'd already seen, there's another one that I feel. It's not something that I can explain well, but I feel like I'm a part of something bigger. Something more than this small house, more than the surrounding grounds. It's as if I've become a part of the land. In a way, I'm an owner, but in another way, I'm a working part of it all. Like I said, it's hard to describe, but something I did in honor of that feeling was to set up a small... It's not a house, and certainly not an altar or anything religious, but it's a space on the mantelpiece that somehow symbolizes that belonging feeling. Right now, there's a small bowl of water, but I intend to add to it as the feeling prompts me. And it's here that I stand and reach out with my feelings to let the land know I'm heading out and ask that I travel safely. Which is when Mouse Eye peered out from behind the bowl, yawning. "Where are we headed?" How he ended up behind the bowl in the first place is another mystery, but one that will stay mysterious. I don't feel like trying to quiz my never forthcoming familiar. Instead, I opted to keep my day moving forward. We're going to town. I feel like getting something, I just don't know what yet. Besides that, I knew I also wanted to do a bit of reagent gathering. There is nothing so motivating as preparing healing potions and helping people, including all the work needed to make it happen. Mouse Eye and I didn't talk much as we walked. My imagination was fully invested in the possibilities. I did remember all the bits that Bob dragged out for me, but over the course of those couple of hours during my last visit, I knew there were a couple of possibilities that I can now afford. Bob was as helpful and friendly as he was last time. After a brief discussion, I bought my first home improvement, a hive. I bought a house for bees. Now, it did seem a bit lacking in that the bees didn't actually come with the hive. He doesn't sell swarms, or queens for that matter, but at least a house is a start. And maybe I was being a bit silly with my money, which mostly became Bob's money, what with paying for the hive. But I felt proud of making my first, and I know for a certainty, not my last purchase. After my purchase, I stood outside the shop feeling a mix of pride, holding on to my new purchase, and foolishness for holding an empty bee house. I decided to visit a couple of places I hadn't visited yet, the Lunar Tower and the Ritual Circle. They're located near each other, a few minutes' walk outside the town proper. Off I went with the paper and wire hive banging against my leg. The walk is a pleasant one. The town itself sits on top of a small hill. The path to the tower and circle descends gently through some woods to a clearing. Small wildflowers bloom along the path borders. The clearing itself is relatively small. There isn't much more than the circle and the tower. And I should note that neither appeared all that impressive. The circle was little more than a small labyrinth with a table made of rock at the center. Before anyone could use this for anything, you'd need a good clearing of weeds and wind-blown debris. And the Lunar Tower looked, how can I say this? Like a tall outhouse. Lunar, I think, refers to the crescent moon carved in the door. But instead of being a place to relieve yourself, there's just a creaky staircase up to a second level where there's another rocky table. I figured, since I was here and I already knew I was going to forage for reagents, that I'd use the towers' power to attune my foraging equipment, the small bit I have. Maybe it would help me in my harvesting. I felt something happen, but I'm not sure what exactly. Through all this, I'd left the hive at the path's entrance. I figured there was no sense in lugging it around and banging it against myself, perhaps even damaging it. I wandered back to the path's mouth, thinking about the sorry state of everything I'd seen and experienced. Yes, I was very recently from the woods in a small woodcutter's cabin. At least it was in good repair, as is my new cottage. But the town of High Rannoch, far from it resembling its lofty name, was a small, ill-kept, rotting timber-wrapped mess. How I'd become so judgmental, I don't know, but that was how I felt. How else to think of a town that treated a place of power like a place where one leaves their business? Incredible. And as is my wont, I was grumbling about the town and making vows to remake things in a better way and making a list of priorities. And that's when I got back to the hive. And Mouse Eye, who appeared to be deep in conversation with someone. It turns out I was mistaken. It was someone's. About a half-dozen bees were walking on, crawling through and flying around the hive. Mouse Eye asked me to sit beside him so that we could all be at the same level during our negotiations. "What negotiations?" I asked. "Rental occupancy," replied Mouse Eye. I felt lost. Mouse Eye uncharacteristically explained, "These ladies are looking for a new hive for a new queen and her small brood. And they like the hive floor plan. I was just explaining that the hive will be located at our cottage. They know the area and approve. They'll even transport the hive to an appropriate location there. The only question is how much rent we're asking for." Rent? I hadn't thought any of this through. I'd figured bees would simply move in and that would be that. Rent? I was at a loss. So I decided to let Mouse Eye continue dealing with the bees, which was just as well. It was all buzzes, squeaks, and sounds that I can't describe at all. None of the sounds were anything I could understand. Eventually, Mouse Eye said, "With your okay, they'll remit honey 4 times per season. Does that sound okay to you?" I found myself doing some quick math. If I could get 4 silver for a sweet potion, like what Madame Hightower had paid, I'd make back my 50 silver in less than a year. 4 silver per sweet times 4 sweet per season times 4 seasons per year is 64 silver per year. I eagerly nodded. "Good, then we're all agreed." Mouse Eye squeaked a last squeak or two, the bees buzzed in response, and the deal was done. I just looked at Mouse Eye in amazement. I was flabbergasted. I was deeply appreciative that the hive was going to be used by agreeable bees. "Mouse Eye, you speak bee?" No." "The bees speak mouse?"
No."
"Then how?"
"We just, understood each other. It's hard to explain, but it all worked out."
And then he changed the subject.
"So, where are we off to now?"
With no hive to lug around, the number of places we could go to just opened up. I'd feared my purchase was going to force a return to the cottage. But now, it was time to visit someplace new. Moonbreaker Mountain. I quietly hoped the moon part of the mountain didn't refer to another outhouse-type setup. While I could have asked Mouse Eye to check ahead and see if everything was safe, I decided instead to have us travel together and experience what might come jointly. I must admit that part of my thinking was centered on how useful Mouse Eye had been with the bees. With his typical non-answer, I still didn't know or even suspect an answer as to how they not only conversed, but negotiated. It was something special, something mysterious, and something I desperately wanted to know how to do. We traveled in silence, comfortably. I was lost in my thoughts, per usual, wondering not only about the bees, but also that sense of belonging at the cottage. It was also a comfortable feeling, a warm, safe feeling, acceptance. I think that was it in a nutshell. It felt good. Also, as usual, I didn't spot the unusual, colorful thing rising above the trees. But then again, I'd been trying to focus my attention on where I was walking. Looking up, that had been less important. I'd never seen anything like it. It was a balloon. Huge stripes of colorful fabric stitched together, bobbing and swaying, but not rising. While it was Mouse Eye who called attention to it, it was me that suggested we go check it out. We climbed a knoll and came face to face with the whole scene. The balloon trying to rise, lines lashed to 3 trees keeping it held in place, a wicker basket lashed underneath the balloon, and a strange man wearing a leather hat snugly over his head, complete with goggles, muttering / saying / yelling to himself over and over again in different volumes, "Yes, but that won't work." As he made to go to another of the trees around which rope was tied, he looked over and spotted me. Quite unexpectedly and to my utter surprise, he began to hoop and gallivant around, shouting things like, "Yes!" and "Saved!" and other such. His enthusiasm, far from reassuring me, had me wondering just what was going on. He began to gesticulate to me, wanting me to approach. And so I did so, albeit cautiously. He began speaking to me. "Please do pardon. I'm afraid I haven't been properly social. Madcap, they call me. Madcap Matt, but Madcap will do. I'm so glad you've come. I'm in need of some help, and I bet you're in want of some adventure." Given that I could think of better things to do than gather reagents simply to store them, rather than getting them while I was actually planning a potion, I was already half convinced to say yes to whatever it was he was going to suggest. I see in your face that you have questions. The help I require is to have the ropes untied from the trees while I'm ready to float away in the basket. I'd had help here, but they left. Apparently, the patients needed to fill the balloon with hot air wasn't present. So they left and left me with no way to safely set this glorious balloon free and make sure I went with it. And the adventure is for you to join me, and I'll do you one better. I'll take you to wherever you'd like to go. What do you think? I was happy to help release the balloon, and I was so tempted to float up into the air. I thought about lying on the meltwater lock beach, watching the clouds go by. So I asked to float up to the clouds. Young miss, your wish is Madcap's command, and I'll do you one better. I'll take you on a tour of the Cloud Isles. The Cloud Isles? I'd seen a mention or two in the old witch's notes, but hadn't really paid much attention to those entries. Flying was a requirement, and since I hadn't been graced with that ability, or even a pair of useless but lovely wings, Madcap got himself an eager helper. That was until it was time to actually help. He tied a rope around me, over the shoulders and through my legs. Not comfortable, but very temporary. I undid the 3 lines from the trees and then ran towards the now rising balloon. Madcap hauled me up easily. After disentangling from my makeshift harness, we watched the ground recede from us as we rose further and further into the sky. What a joy birds experience! It was beyond description. I swear I'll never forget the sensations, the sights, and, to Madcap's credit, he held off on being a tour guide until after the initial amazement had worn off. Slightly. It's beautiful up here, isn't it? And so peaceful. I can steer the airship in a way, but the most important part is reading the wind currents, and of course knowing the lay of things. Speaking of, I don't believe we've properly met yet. As I said, you can call me Madcap. They call me that because that's how people feel about my love of flying. So what may I call you? Mistress Sweetwater. He closed his eyes for a minute as if he were searching inside his head for something. I don't recall hearing that name. Whereabouts do you live? Outside High Rannoch. I'm the new witch. Aha! Are you now? How exciting! I live in the other direction, but I come to Moonbreaker because it's the best place to launch from. I'll travel back and forth while the weather's good, and spring is known for her fresh winds and, quite frankly, perfect flying conditions. We continued to chat and look and be awestruck. I never get tired of the view, he said somewhat distantly. I think he was just lost in the view. After a while, he pointed out bits of land floating in the air. It was so odd seeing what appeared to be islands, but coming up at them. Here we are, the Cloud Isles! As impressive as the land below, receding had been, it didn't hold a candle to land seemingly floating on clouds. I had no words. In fact, I still don't. Small islands, big islands, rocky islands, forested islands, flat islands, hilly islands, an island with help written out in rocks. Islands with... Wait. Help? Madcap, do you see that? He looked where I was pointing, and then he looked at me. Ah, that. You can't be too careful up here. That could be a trick. Pirates will do sneaky things like that to rope in the unwary. Thankfully, I'm wary. So let's head off that-a-way. He pointed directly opposite to where the rocky appeal for aid was. But what if that's someone genuinely in need? Then someone will come along to help. I paused, then, what if that someone is me? He paused, then, well... I pressed. You did say my wish is your command. I was afraid I'd pushed too hard, but he just smiled in acquiescence. You are entirely right. Your wish is indeed my command. I'll get us over there, but let's approach cautiously. I looked quickly for Mouse-Eye to see if he could make sure things were safe, but he was nowhere to be found. As we got closer to the island, Madcap yelled out, Ahoy the island! Ahoy the cry for help! A minute later, a figure staggered out from the woods bordering the rocky plea. Well, I'll be a nightingale's wart. That's old Sebastian Kittington. How in the blazes did he end up here? To me, he said, hang on, we're going in for a landing. A minute later, we sat down gently on top of the help sign, and seconds after that, Sebastian ran up to the basket. Saints preserve you, Madcap! Thank goodness you're here! I wasn't sure how much longer I could have held out. Madcap made no move to get out of the basket, nor to invite the stranded man in. Sebastian, you old charlatan, what are you doing up here? Aside from hiding, of course. I could see the story quickly being rehearsed, and then we got to hear the performance. Well, as to how I got here, I did a bit of business with a traveling merchant. Next thing I know, I found myself here. Madcap just crossed his arms in disbelief. A bit of business? What'd you try to steal? Sebastian's eyes widened. Nothing, I swear. Madcap said nothing. He just stared. I felt the need to speak up, having brought this about. I'm sorry, but can someone tell me what's going on? Madcap spoke first. This man is a con, a thief, a gambler, a drunk, and overall a ne'er-do-well. He owes a lot of people a lot of money, and he's been missing for weeks. I just stood there thinking, then, well, does he owe you money? Madcap nodded. 5 silver. Sebastian started. Look, Madcap, I told you that I'd cover the bill that day, but I didn't currently have my money with me. I'm good for it. Just get me down to some proper ground, and I swear I'll pay you what you're owed. I stared at the two of them. There's hard feelings over 5 silver. Really. Sebastian grabbed a hold of that. You hear her, Madcap? She's talking sense. 5 silver, a pittance, really. Come on, let me off this rock and I'll pay you what's due. Madcap held up his hand. So how did you end up here again? Who was that merchant? Sebastian sighed loudly. Okay, so how was I supposed to know he was a wizard with the ability to relocate someone to a place such as this? Madcap started to laugh. Now that's closer to the truth. Fine, climb aboard. Sebastian made as if to run, but then Madcap held up his hand. But first, you will show my passenger, the new Witch of High Rannoch, a brief tour of what must now be a fully explored island, and since I know you know a bit about things of value, including such things as grow in the ground, you'll help her gather a few things. And then he turned to me, assuming that's to your liking, Mistress Sweetwater. I was thrilled. Walking around on a floating island, being directed here and there, courteously but quickly, by my guide, was awesome. We gathered moon lotus flower pods. They'd closed up as protection against the sun's rays, but the pollen inside was valuable. Inside Sebastian's camp, I grabbed some nimbus fish scales. They, along with the leftover bones, were all that was left of one of the few things Sebastian had available to eat. I think I heard him say that he'll never eat another fish ever again. Willingly, at least. But the real find was realizing that Sebastian had used star shards within his help sign. Not only were they powerful reagents, but by placing one on my mantelpiece, it'd be another subtle sign to anyone coming to the cottage that I was a witch. Once everything had been gathered and Sebastian had the few things of value he'd collected with him, we went to the balloon. And before Sebastian boarded, he reached into his pocket and pulled out 5 silver. I managed to find a coin here and there up here. Here's what I owe you. I'm grateful to be leaving this place. Madcap held the money for a moment, then turned to me. I'd have left him had I been here solo, and I nearly did despite you being here. This, I believe, should rightfully be yours. Shocked, I tried to decline, but he insisted. Thank you, Madcap, was all I could think to say. We clambered in, then Sebastian laughed, slapped his hands together, then said, I'm so glad we're all happy. Now, can we make our way away from here? As we floated down back towards Moonbreaker Mountain, things were awkwardly silent. I think Sebastian in particular was formulating next steps, and not necessarily ones that would lead to better judgment or behaviors. You're a witch, eh? On the lookout for an apprentice? It felt like he was hunting for a safe haven. Who would seek to collect a debt against a witch or her retinue? Not at this time. Thank you, however, for your interest in working for me. Figured as much, but I had to ask. Madcap softly glowered. Sebastian noticed. Hey, no, I'm not looking to welch. I'm good for all of it. I had to ask, how much do you owe? I figured if his debt to Madcap was only 5 silver, how much could the total debt be? Sebastian started to hum and haw, followed by Madcap chiming in. It has to be a few thousand, and most of that is to far more powerful people than I'd ever want to mess with. That was... wow. Several thousand? It was possible to get into debt that deep? Wow. Sebastian just shrugged. I had a bit of bad luck and a couple of business deals that didn't pan out. What will you do? I just had to know. He shrugged again. I'm thinking I could try to make good by giving my original plan another go. Madcap jumped in. Or, instead of trying to rob well-guarded houses, you could become a farmer. Show people you're willing to make coin with good, honest work. You'll eventually be forgiven. Sebastian looked like it had just been suggested that he collect night soil. A farmer? No, gods no. Maybe I'll acquire some stock and open a shop. That sounded promising to me. You know your reagents, maybe you can gather them. We all discussed it with various levels of enthusiasm until Madcap got us safely on the ground. I prepared to head back home, but Madcap stopped me first. Many thanks, mistress. I'll happily fly with you again any day, any time. Head off now. I'll make sure to direct Sebastian towards his home and away from you. He's not a violent man, but my heart will feel better with distance between your good self and that fraud. I thanked him back and headed off. A few minutes later, I felt Mouseye on my shoulder. I'm looking backward. No sign of anyone following us. How did he know to watch for anyone? Hasn't he been nowhere to be found for the entire balloon trip? I asked. Sorry, I'm kind of shy. It's fine being with you, but I don't like people looking at me. Besides, it helps me watch better. So, were you with me the entire time? Yeah, pretty much. So not all the time, eh? Where else did you go? He shrugged. Oh, nowhere in particular. I sighed. A straight answer was too much to work for and too hard to drag out of him. It had been a great day, and I didn't want to spoil it. I let that secret remain so. On our way home, I thought about the balloon and the amazing flight. What adventures Madcap must experience. I certainly hope to have another one sometime soon. I began to hum a tuneless tune, a little bit of random melody that seemed to fit the surroundings, light, airy, happy. I even skipped in time. The trail went down into a narrow valley. I could reach out and touch both sides. The walls of what quickly became a small canyon rose above me. Up ahead was a block of rock in the middle of the path. And as I approached, a human-headed, lion-bodied creature jumped onto the rock and watched me approach. All I could think was, what now? A few paces shy of the makeshift pedestal, the creature spoke. Hold, traveler. I am a sphinx. According to ancient law, you must answer a riddle. Successfully answer, and you may pass. Fail, and pay the penalty. I wasn't amused. Look, I'm tired. I'm just looking to go home and settle in. No matter. You have approached, and so now you must answer. And failure to answer at all is to answer incorrectly and subjects you to the penalty. I sighed. Fine. What's the penalty? That brought it up short. The penalty? Yes, the penalty. What will happen if I just simply keep walking past? Oh, The now uncertain-looking Sphinx looked over its shoulder. From behind some trees, a loud whisper, You eat her! The Sphinx responded, I told you I'm vegetarian. I can't eat her. A pause, and then I jumped in. How about if I don't answer correctly, I have to teach you a riddle? While there were loud objections coming from the trees behind the Sphinx, it proclaimed, I like that. I could learn a new riddle. Accepted. Well, that was a penalty I could live with. Okay, what's your riddle? The Sphinx sat even more erect. You drive a cabbage cart. Now note. You drive the cart along the first row of a field and collect 32 cabbages. On the second row, you collect another 17 cabbages. And on the third and last row, you collect another 26 cabbages. Your riddle is, what's the name of the cabbage cart driver? I was about to say how many cabbages had been collected when I realized what the question really was. And potentially what it really was. May I ask questions about this riddle? The Sphinx hesitated, then magnanimously allowed me to ask. If the name I say is how the driver is known but isn't the true name, will the answer be accepted? He shook his head. No, it must be the true name. Ah, but anyone knowing my true name could have power over me, so how to answer? I gave it some thought. I looked at Mouse Eye, or where he'd been. He no longer was. I was on my own on this one. Okay. How about the cabbage cart's driver's name is the true name of the witch known as Mistress Sweetwater. The Sphinx just sat there, blinking. It rings of truth. Very well, the witch known as Mistress Sweetwater, you have passed the test. Traveled safely. And he stepped down and headed towards where the other voices had been coming from. As I passed, two much larger sphinxes were huddled around the one who'd posed my riddle. One looked at me. He's learning the ropes and needed some moral and emotional support. It'll be better next time. Oh, goody. I just smiled, headed for home, and hoped this was the last of the day's adventures. I was so ready to kick off my shoes, enjoy a tea, and relax. A few minutes later, Mouse Eye reappeared. I snapped, Thanks for helping me out there. I could have been Sphinx food. No, you had it handled from the beginning, but great move to suggest a penalty of your own choosing. I don't know if I believed him at all, but it did feel good to not outwit the Sphinx, but to turn the situation into something that favored me better. Not much later, I finally arrived home. As I stepped onto the grounds, I felt not peace, not serenity. Something was wrong. Of course. As I approached the cottage, I saw sitting on the ground a very unhappy young teen boy. The look he shot me was so similar to the one Sebastian had given. For some reason, this boy needed rescuing. He called out, Don't come any closer! The bees have gone mad! They'll attack! Are you being stung now? No, they seem to leave me alone as long as I don't move from where I am right now. The bees, eh? Let me guess. Did you chase a flying hive? He looked absolutely gobsmacked. How did you know? How could you have known? And then I saw my wild rose. Trampled. You chased it, weren't looking where you were going, trampled my flower bread, and then tried to run off without fixing the damage. I swear his jaw dropped so low that he could have easily scooped dirt with his lower lip. The real question here is, are you remorseful? He just nodded. Then what you'll do is walk over to that poor rose and fix it as best you can. That's when his eyes went wide with terror. I don't know anything about fixing dead flowers, miss. I'm sorry, miss. I just want to go home. Well, then, you'll learn. Come on. And with that, I walked past where he was sitting to show I wouldn't be stung and headed for my poor wild rose. It looked bad. I wasn't sure if it could have been salvaged, but I was determined to make that young man try. A few seconds later, and watching every direction all at once, he joined me. Still not stung, right? Bees die if they sting you, and they certainly don't want to die on account of a clumsy and thoughtless boy. So here, kneel down. I looked over at him, afraid, panicked, overwhelmed. Close your eyes. Breathe. You're safe here. You didn't mean ill will. Just breathe. To his credit, he did. As he calmed down, and before we moved on to saving unsavable plants, I thought it best to get the niceties out of the way. What's your name? Mick. And where do you live, Mick? Turns out he, along with the rest of his quite large family, work as tanners. While adults would describe it as far off, kids cover ground the way an airship flies. Quickly. Okay, Mick, I want you to re-dig a hole, put in the roots, and while you do that, apologize for your carelessness. I'm so sorry, miss, for... I stopped him. Did you trample me? No, miss. Apologize to what you did trample. He clearly thought I was crazy, but it was what I felt was needed to make it all work out. And with the help of some ominous buzzing behind him, he did as I asked. I'm so sorry, little plant. I hope you'll be healthy again. I heard the sincerity. The wild rose did as well, I think, because we watched it heal itself. It did lose some stem and leaves, but overall it would live and do so happily. I felt a change in his demeanor, though wondering if he'd just been callously humiliated. So I grabbed his wrist before he got up. I'm Mr. Sweetwater, the new witch. This is my cottage, and these are my grounds. You made a mistake, you've made amends, and everything has worked out because you worked to fix your mistake. Now it's time for you to go. I have work to do. I gave him a few minutes before walking to the hive. Thank you for being a part of this place, makers of honey, pollinators of flowers, guardians of the grounds. Thank you. I swear I heard, within the buzzing, something that sounded like an acknowledgement and gratitude. And with that, it was time for this witch to store some reagents, brew some tea, and listen to the music of the night. Episode 5, Spring, Week 3, Cure Episode, Bob's Kludgy Mouth. This is the life. When I think about how hard my father had to work, cutting down trees, processing them into transportable logs, and then getting them to the sawmill, so much time and effort for so little return, both in terms of money and respect. And yet here I am, comfortably set up in this lovely cottage, supported by people who, by the way things have gone so far, get warts on various parts of their bodies and pay handsomely to have them removed. I don't think my father, when he sent me off to school, would ever have expected me to find such an easy and lucrative place. And I didn't even have to attend that silly school. It just can't get much better than this. Although, now that I think on it, there's one thing that would improve the day. A small sampling of the honey I know is inside the beehive. Which is why I walked over to the hive, all busy and buzzing with activity, with a small spoon, ready to taste that golden sweetness. My mind wandered to the contents of the hive, then to how my mouth would delight in the thick and rich flavor, the product of so much effort, and all mine. The bees saw me coming, and I think were prepping up a droplet or 5, enough so I would know if it was sweet enough, rich enough, delicious enough. I couldn't wait. But I would have to wait because something happened. I think the wind shifted. But it wasn't the wind itself that put a delay on my delight, but rather the smell on the wind was enough to cause anyone to pause. It smelled like a midden, but a midden that had clogged due to some large thing that had died and was slowly blocking the flow, meanwhile rotting slowly away. Whatever it was bad. So bad. And not stopping. Mouse Eye emerged from somewhere close and ran up my pants leg, then up my shirt sleeve and up onto my shoulder. Before he spoke, I could feel the disapproval of my wasting a spot of honey for my personal gratification. I assume your nose is working. Whoosh! I nodded. Do you suppose the town will get that fixed soon? It's unbearable. I don't know. At first I thought he was answering about the high Rannoch midden, maybe called low Rannoch. being fixed. But then when the wind shifted again, but the smell didn't, I wondered if he was thinking it wasn't coming from the town at all. Mouseye, can you check to see if this stink is coming from the town? A pause, then, must I? I was just about to say yes when I spied someone approaching the cottage. No, Mouseye, I think the source of the foul air has just arrived for help. I tucked my spoon into my pocket and headed back. As I got closer, I saw it was none other than Bob. What in the world had he done to have this happen? He saw me coming and, kind soul that he is, tested the wind to get himself downwind, yet still within shouting distance. He looked abashed. My apologies, mistress. I'm afraid I've been cursed. He was half gagging as he yelled that to me. I asked Mouseye to spare Bob and I from shouting to each other, but of course Mouseye was nowhere to be found. Typical. What happened? As Bob answered, I swear the air around him turned an unhealthy shade of green. Business deal went sour. A bog goblin swore he'd found something amazing and wanted me to buy it. Fen-toad scarf. The thing about it is it goes bad really quickly. You need to harvest from living fen-toads at your workbench. So what the goblin brought me was useless and not worth a thing. The goblin wasn't happy that I wouldn't buy, so he cursed me. Oh boy, did he ever. At least the diagnosis was easy. The potion was going to be a bit trickier than what I'd made before. The curse wasn't difficult to deal with, but the infection part was going to be a challenge. But no matter, I'd have Bob right as rain in no time, and I told him that. Gods, I hope so. I know the reek isn't good where you are, but from where I'm sitting, it's wretched, and I've got to keep my shop closed until I can wait on customers again. I gathered my things, bid him farewell. He insisted on staying in my cottage so as to not offend the townspeople with his breath. I wasn't happy that my cottage would probably forever smell of bog goblin, but I kept my mouth shut and headed off to Heroes Hollow. So, not that I'm complaining, but Heroes Hollow isn't my favorite place. For one, it's hollow. For two, I'm no hero. However, needs be that I go there, so needs be that I go there. At the very least, I now know where the walk-in entrance is. The falling-in entrance is also no, and very much not preferred. My goal, my focus, was on the infection. After all that I'd collected ahead of time, I hadn't gotten an infection reagent yet, and I figured while I was out, I'd pick up a fresh curse reagent as well. And so I was on the lookout for silverleaf. The difficulty with silverleaf is that it's sharp, clings to the sides of caverns and tunnel walls, and only grows in the dark. It's easy to cut yourself if you aren't careful. However, it is easier if you have a mouse who loves to watch things. He spotted it without much difficulty. And that's where things went from going well to absolute disaster. And in the end, it was my fault, but I was so absolutely certain I was right, I just wouldn't listen. I'd gotten it into my head that I needed liquid fire. It's not easy to find and dangerous if you're not prepared. Note the fire part of all that. But I was convinced it needed to be mixed into the potion. Mouseye disagreed with me, and so we got into a bit of an argument. Yes, it's every bit as silly as it sounds. There I was, arguing with a mouse who claimed that not only was I in the wrong, but arrogantly so, with obvious references to my near wasting a dose of honey, in a dark tunnel not far from where I'd been accidentally temporarily imprisoned a couple of weeks prior. I said a couple of very not nice things, including his disappearing when things got tough. Not only not nice, they were unfair. I know that now. Heck, I knew it then too, but I was so full of myself. Frankly, I didn't recognize myself, looking back. Definitely not my finest moment. And then it got worse. Oh, so much worse. I said that maybe I should send him back to wherever familiars come from and get one that was truly useful. Mouseye, stunned, just murmured, I suppose you should, and then disappeared. No flash, no sound, just 1 second there, and the next, not, except for a single tear that glowed faintly blue in the dark and slowly faded away. I was a mess, but a mess who choked back her tears and focused once again on gathering liquid fire. Note to self, don't try to gather liquid fire when you're a mess. You'll just make a mess of it. I wandered around the tunnels doing my best to find the blasted fire. Nope, nope, and nope. I think I actually screamed in frustration. Another note to self, when you scream in dark, creepy places, you may attract unwanted attention to yourself. I got lucky. It wasn't unwanted attention. It was more unhelpful at first. After I screamed, I stood stark still as it echoed along passages, dark and grim. Yes, I said dark and grim. I'm trying to be more poetic. I wasn't thinking dark and grim at the time. My thoughts were more like stupid, stupid, stupid. Especially when I heard footsteps, and they got closer and closer still. While it sounded like a small army coming at me, what I saw was a chest, a wooden chest moving towards me. When it got close enough, I could see what must have been 100 little legs underneath the body. It was weird. It was strange. It was what an enthusiastic dog would be if it were a piece of furniture. An enthusiastic dog that really wanted a treat. It begged. It whined. It stood up on more than 2 legs while all the rest waved ineffectually in the air. I had no idea what to do, and my super able translator had just buggered off. Drat. I patted my pockets to show that I had nothing to offer. No treats to be had here. See, I'm patting my pockets and finding something. What the? Why is there smooth croak in my pocket? Why is there? The walking box nuzzled my pocket. Yes, that one. He enjoyed the treat, I guess, and then it kind of crouched down, opened its lid, and let me peer in. I tried to look without getting too close, but it just wasn't possible to look effectively without sticking my head in. So I looked. Do you remember that I was feeling incredibly stupid? Yeah, looking back, this was another example. Yes, there was something in there. Yes, I was curious. Yes, I might have been swallowed and that would have been it. It turns out there was something the chest wanted but couldn't make happen on its own. There were little knitted socks in the chest, about 100 of them. I know because I put booties onto each of the chest's feet. All of them. The end ones were okay, but the middle ones were harder, and most of the feet were in the middle. Once I was done, it padded off, and I was running out of time. I knew Bob wouldn't wait forever. As the chest padded off, I yelled out that I needed to find liquid fire. It stopped, managed to look over its shoulder, then, I guess beckoned is the best word, and off it led directly to liquid fire. I was excited, tired, morning mouse-eye, definitely not at my best. I managed to nearly hurt myself repeatedly. My clothes are going to need extensive mending, and my shoes are now more like open-toed sandals, but I finally managed to collect some. Finally. And as I mentally reviewed the benefits, I realized Mouse-Eye had been absolutely right. I didn't need this. Hadn't needed it. Had just wasted time and energy gathering this. I wanted to cry. So I did. The chest wandered off. I sat, absorbed in misery. I needed old blood, really needed it, and I had no idea how to... Wait. That cell I'd fallen into, wasn't there manacles on the wall? And where there's manacles, maybe there's struggle to escape. Maybe there was violence and spilled blood, and maybe there's harvestable blood. I set off at a run. Not so fast that I'd hurt myself if I banged into anything, but fast enough that I could feel air streaming past my face. I didn't make it to the cells. I didn't need to. On my way there, I passed by where I'd found the silver leaf. Had someone been extraordinarily unlucky with their harvest? Maybe sliced through an artery? It wasn't as if I was hoping someone would hurt themselves. I was hoping someone had hurt themselves. I found what I was looking for. Tucked away in a large crevice was the remains of someone, and there were blood scrapings aplenty. I raced home, hoping I was in time, that Bob hadn't left yet. He hadn't, but he wasn't happy at all that I'd taken as long as I had, I think. Actually, now that I'm going over what did happen, I think I was so embarrassed from the time I knew I'd wasted that I blew right by him, and frankly, the smell encouraged my speeding by, so that I didn't take the time to let him know that everything was going to be okay. And soon. As I was stoking the fire, I looked up to see Bob throw up his hands in frustration and start to leave. There was no way I was going to let him go after everything I'd been through, so I had to dash out and stop him. But first I had to catch my breath, and that wasn't easy since in catching my breath I caught big drafts of his. "Bob, sir, please, I've got everything I need to brew up the potion. I need just a bit more time to get things prepped and mixed. Please, don't go." I think I half wailed. He stood there for a minute, then, "I thought maybe things weren't going well. You weren't giving me the time of day. Anyway, I'll settle back into a chair and wait for your cure." While there were bunches of things I wanted to say, I only got out, "Thank you," before dashing back to the cottage. Okay, not quite true. I started to dash, but then Bob yelled out, "I'm not going anywhere, so just slow down and make the potion you know you can make. If you hurry, I could end up with no voice, or the face of a chicken. I could be stuck with bog goblin breath for the rest of my days." I did end up dashing into the cottage, but before I set to restarting my preparations again, I went to the little house, I guess, on the mantelpiece, closed my eyes, and just forced myself to breathe. And I counted them, all 10. Feeling much better from that pause, and better able to concentrate, I got back to my work. I got the fire stoked and began boiling the old blood. It reeked almost as bad as Bob's breath. While that was going, I crushed up the silver leaf. As I worked it into a powder, my mind drifted back to Hero's Hollow, the endless dark of the dungeon, and Mouse Eye. That I found Mouse Eye frustratingly obstinate, secretive, puzzling. How the silver leaf was approaching dust levels, crushed far more than I'd intended. Before the potion could be completed, I had one last ingredient to grab: honey, the bit of poison in the old blood would introduce. The spoon was still in my pocket. I pulled it out as I headed for the hive. The buzzing swelled as I approached. I hadn't figured out how to retrieve the honey, something else needing solving. Ugh. But this time I was going to do things properly. I stood in front of the hive and asked for a dose of honey, and held out the spoon in case they didn't understand me. Several bees began to fly circles around the base of the hive. I held my spoon under where they were flying. A small drizzle of honey dripped into my spoon. Holding it carefully, I thanked the bees, then headed back. The last step was combining all the ingredients together. A bit of mixing over low heat so that the honey would melt throughout, and it was done. I walked it out to Bob. He accepted it and drank it down. And in minutes, his breath was as fresh as honey can make it. And then, instead of reaching into his pocket or otherwise making haste back to High Rannoch, he just set the cup down, looked thoughtful for a minute, then began to speak. "You, little miss, and begging your pardon, I mean no offense, are young. You have a gift, no doubt, an ability to heal the body. But dealing with people is more than the physical. It's about compassion. When you came to my shop the first time, I served you and your desires to view my stock for a fair bit of time. I never once complained about what I knew was going to be my very cold lunch or my aching feet. It's something I learned when I sat with my grandfather as he ran the shop and when I clerked in the back for my father. It's something for you to learn now. It's more important in many ways to let people know what's going on, keep up their spirits, that sort of thing. Maybe you need a hobby that will help you be more peaceful. I know the old witch got into knitting baby booties. Really got into it. Bought way more yarn than ever she made into the town's babies. I know that. Maybe you should try your hand at something like that. I do see that you're far more calm now than you were when you first got back from your foraging hunt. Think on what I said. It's a manner that served my family for generations, and I hope will serve you well as well. And now I should pay you, get out of your hair, and get my shop aired out for opening tomorrow. The 20 silver clinked into my hand, but it felt like his words were worth far more. He waved as he stepped out of view. And I wandered back to the cottage, and to the spirit house on the mantelpiece, the house's house. It still wasn't much more than a small bowl of water, a candle, the star shard, and a few wildflower blossoms, but it represented more than what the parts were. Not a great explanation, but it's the best I can manage right now. It certainly wasn't perfect. It just wasn't perfect. And I certainly wasn't perfect. Oh no, not perfect at all, but I was doing the best I could. Not perfect, but doing my best. That's me. And this place, not perfect, but doing its best. And the bees, not perfect, but doing their best. And Mousei, not perfect, but doing his best. And I wasn't allowing him to be imperfect. His imperfect. Maybe it's frustrating to me that his imperfections are so frustratingly frustrating to me, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how I behaved. I didn't treat Bob well, didn't treat myself well, and didn't treat Mousei well. I said it to myself, to the house's house, and to Mousei, wherever he was. And then I chuckled to myself. Wherever he is? I can probably guess. I looked up at the mantelpiece again. Water, candle, star shard, 2 eyes amongst a few wildflower blossoms. I reached over to where his little mouse head should be and gave it some gentle pets. You know, Mousei, I've spent my last 2 weeks wandering around, going to town, exploring here and there, but I haven't spent any time at all talking with you, sharing thoughts and ideas. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to stay here, walk the property a bit, but most of all, get to know you better. What do you think about that? With a mischievous grin, all he said was, Must I? Episode 6, Spring, Week 3, Rest episode. Here, yet not here. Rainy days. A part of me knows they are absolutely necessary to keep things green and lush, and they tend to keep everyone indoors, so there's far fewer chances of anyone doing anything that would end up bringing them here. For me, it meant lingering in bed, then getting a comfortable fire going. A warm, dry room against the wet chill outside is just lovely. It was a good time to reflect on the past couple of weeks, to spend some time coming to terms with myself and my witchy role, and getting to know Mousei better. I'd made an actual small house on my mantelpiece. It wasn't much, a few sticks, some string to keep the pieces together, and the little things I'd gathered for it. So maybe house was too much word for the lean-to it actually was, but on the other hand, it was a structure. I'd made it intending for it to be a house, and most importantly, I'd made it. Pride of ownership, pride of craftsmanship, and I should add pride of potionship. I poured myself a tea, then set a second cup under my lean-to. House, my lean house. And I guess that's a thing too. I did have, again, a bit of money in my pocket, but to be able to afford much more in terms of tools or upgrading of equipment, I'd have to live a bit lean for a time. No matter, I was used to that sort of living. Going from having no money and having little concept of how much things cost, to having money and seeing exactly how much things cost, back to having a little money, it was all a lot to take in. But I'd bought a hive, an investment I know will pay dividends well into the future, and my next purchases, when I can finally afford them, will do the same. Maybe I didn't know the value of a piece of silver, but I did know the value of basic math. And speaking of math, and things not adding up, nice segue, I think, there's the matter of the smooth croak in my pocket to feed the weird chest thing. I know I hadn't put it in there, So there was only one way it had ended up there. Mouse Eye. How had he known I'd need it? After I'd taken some time to just sit and think and do some deep breathing, I asked Mouse Eye about it. He was laying under the lean-to, house, eyes half closed, appropriate for being under a half-house, when I asked the question. His eyes didn't open as he responded.
Getting it into your pocket was simple. You didn't even notice the spoon you walked around with all that day. As to why I put it in there, you know how the bees and I talked and we understood each other even though we don't speak each other's languages? It was like that. I just knew I had to do it. So I did. And I think you experienced something of the sort with the bees. Same basic thing.
That was something. Maybe it had something to do with the land? Did it somehow know things ahead of time? Or maybe Mouse Eye did? I knew there were bound to be surprises related to the cottage, but this was more than I'd anticipated. Is that how you knew I'd be fine with the Sphinx?
Mm-hmm.
So what about inside Hero's Hollow? Did you know that was going to happen? Mouse Eye opened his eyes.
I know little bits here and there. I don't know everything, especially when they go wrong.
But you knew I'd be okay down there, right? You knew I'd be safe? He closed his eyes and didn't answer. After a minute, I murmured to myself, I'll take that as a no. The silence felt awkward. I knew I had a tendency to get angry, or snappy, or snarky. I decided to surprise myself, if no one else, with some gratitude. Mouse Eye, you are amazing. You can see bits of the future and, as much as you can, you help me and my patients. Thank you for everything you do. I watched as Mouse Eye peeked up a bit, pressed his front paws together in what I think could be called a prayer pose, wiggled his whiskers, and said, You're welcome, mistress. And then, instead of settling back down, he looked more attentive. This was promising. I decided to ask another question. When you disappear, say in the air balloon with Madcap, you said you don't always stay with me, so where do you go? To his credit, Mouse Eye didn't answer at first, but instead just looked thoughtful.
It's hard to describe, but I'm glad you asked because it's something that should be shared.
I knew well enough to allow him to speak in his own time. This felt momentous.
Let's talk about this cottage. The old witch lived in it. Maybe will again, maybe not, but in the past, she lived here.
I nodded, but had no idea where this was going.
So you came here. You were formerly living in a woodcutter's cottage. Following so far?
I didn't see why I wouldn't be, but okay, I nodded again.
What do you think would have happened if somebody else had moved in?
I had no idea. Apply to be an apprentice? Go back home? Maybe work with Francie as a domestic? Mouse Eye nodded.
What if you'd never successfully made it here? Like the wagon was attacked by bandits. Or you had to stay home to take care of your ailing father.
What, ailing father? Was he okay?
No. I don't know anything about your father or your mother for that matter. I'm just asking what would have happened to the witch's cottage.
I was drawing blanks.
It would eventually attract a witch. It's a witch's cottage. At some point, a witch would live here.
I nodded slowly.
Here's where it gets tricky. What if, at roughly the same time, all the possible people who could live in the cottage did live in this cottage?
Tricky. He did say tricky, but he didn't say impossible. So I did.
Well, sort of. Because while you are here and experiencing your life with me, as time goes on, there are other witches who are experiencing their lives with their familiars, all at the same time that you are. Unlike most of them, you've just been told that they also live in their cottages, which are their versions of this cottage, and this cottage is your version of the cottage. See?
Nope, not at all.
Okay, how about this? I was at one point and for a very short period of time in another version of this cottage.
I know my face was a complete furrowed mess. So much for a relaxing day. Metaphysics was what I'd really intended.
And I brought something back with me, but I didn't know how to tell you who it's from, so here.
Once again, a surprise came out from behind the lean-to. A letter, a small folded-up letter, from someone named Pip. It said, "Hi, I'm Pip. I'm living in this cottage. It's a bit lonely sometimes. Do you want to be pen pals? Elaborate box for yes, a very plain and much smaller box for no." It was signed, "Your new bestie, Pip." And then a PS, "Please check yes." And the note was covered in hearts. A new bestie? Living here but not here? I looked at Mouse Eye in amazement. This person is someone who... Wow, so... okay. Can I send a letter back? Okay, so time to grab a bit of paper and a pencil and...
Sorry, almost forgot. Here's this.
He pulled a reagent I'd never seen before out from where the letter had been. As I looked at it, I asked, "Is there anything else back there that I should know about?"
No, not yet anyway.
Not yet? Well, I suppose letters can come through there. Anyway, the reagent, a plant, certainly. Maybe it's...
Oh, yeah, it's called rosemary. Good for relaxation and something called branching out.
I didn't know what to do with it. It isn't in the witch's notes. How? Mouse Eye to the rescue. He saw my confusion.
I think the old witch didn't know everything there is to know. You may find this useful when you need to treat someone who has an affliction not on the list.
Huh. She maybe didn't know everything? The book isn't all there is to witching? I think the ground dropped out from underneath me. Luckily, I was still seated, so the ground was close at hand. The world swirled around me. Other witches here, but not here? Witches sending me letters from here, but not here? My hand brushed past my teacup, newly filled teacup. Mouse Eye, with eyes closed and head resting on his paws, was still up on the mantelpiece. Surprises indeed. Mouse Eye, if I write a letter to Pip, will you deliver it? I expected one answer, but didn't receive it. This is what I wrote. Hi, Pip. Call me Sweet. You make lovely hearts. I hope you don't mind if I don't make them too. I'd love to be your pen pal. Tick mark in a yes box. And yes, it is lonely being a witch, but a little less so now that I know that you were living here, yet not here in the cottage. Mouse Eye tried to explain it to me, but I still don't get it. Your best bestie back, Sweet. So that is all 7 episodes from episode 0 through episode 6. And this is the first volume of several that I'll be making to help consolidate down all of the storytelling and the writing and whatnot that has gone into this project. So until the next one comes out in a few months' time, I hope you continue to enjoy Mr. Streetwater, her familiar Mouse Eye, and all the happenings within Apothecaria. Bye for now.